Well, I guess it's just tradition. Big Finish time, and the one that my Patreon supporters opted to have me do for this go is The Holy Terror, which is a 6th Doctor audio adventure. So this will be my first one dealing with the 6th Doctor only, because the first one I did was Sirens of Time, which featured 3 Doctors, including the 6th. So this is my first time dealing with him on his own in Big Finish. And so I was a little bit nervous about that, although also excited because, yeah, even just the little bit I got of him, well, not a little bit, but about a third out of the whole story that I got of him in Sirens of Time. I already like Colin Baker in the audios a heck of a lot more than I liked him in the TV show. So I was excited for that. I was excited because this featured Frobisher, who is a character I had heard a ton about, but haven't read any of the comics or heard any of the audios that the character has appeared in. And it's also written by Rob Shearman, who is a name that I mainly... Well, I mean, I've only ever experienced Rob Shearman's writing one other time, and that is because he wrote the Series 1 episode Dalek, which is in fact an adaptation of his own earlier audio drama called Jubilee, which I'll get to eventually. But for right now... And Dalek is brilliant. It's a great episode. It's phenomenal. So... that's my only direct knowledge of it, but I also know that he is the favorite writer of one of my favorite YouTubers, which is Stu Bagfull, and he's raved about Rob Shearman more than a few times. And I'm not going to say that automatically made it be like, oh, I bet this is brilliant, because Stu Bagfull and I don't always line up in terms of our thoughts. I mean, like, he really likes the Waldo moment as an episode of Black Mirror for some reason. But knowing what it is that he tends to like, I was really curious to see what I was going to get with this. And it is something else. This episode, I'm going to do what I usually do. I'm going to hold off on spoilers till a little bit later. I'll give you a heads up before I get there. But there is a lot to talk about this, and a lot of the most fascinating stuff to talk about. I can't until the spoiler section. So let's go broad strokes. It's amazing. Like, I'm honestly kind of blown away by this. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say that it's better than Spare Parts, but for me and what I like and how it connected with me, I like this better than Spare Parts. And I loved Spare Parts. I thought Spare Parts was phenomenal. But hearing this, there's part of me that's like, how is this? Why is everyone like, oh, if you're going to listen to any Big Finish, be sure you listen to Spare Parts, or you check out this compilation thing, or listen to I Davros, but I haven't seen the Holy Terror come up in those conversations, and wow, I was really blown away by this. Okay, as much of the plot as I can lay out before it gets into spoilers. So the Doctor and Frobisher, and if you don't know who Frobisher is, oh boy, how do we explain this? Okay, so Frobisher is a shapeshifter, and his preferred, most common, and how he appears in this story, form that he takes is that of a talking penguin. And he talks with a kind of a Brooklyn accent, because he's a private investigator. So that's the companion, is a talking penguin. So that's Frobisher. So the Doctor and Frobisher, basically the TARDIS kind of gets fed up, and as the Doctor says, it goes on strike and parks where it feels like parking, with absolutely no input, not even taking the Doctor's request. And the Doctor and Frobisher end up in this castle, and this castle's pretty expansive. It's pretty big, but they land basically in the middle of a power transition. The god Emperor, who is worshipped as a god, and treated as a god by the populace and all the servants, the slaves who live here, has died. And so we're going through the standard ceremony of appointing his successor, which is, of course, his son, and everything involved in that. And it opens on this with the scribe, like the official scribe, the one who writes down everything that's going on, basically keeping up the Bible. Like the Bible gets updated in real time every time their god dies and a new one gets appointed, because the thing is, they take this the emperor's god thing really literally. So what that means is whenever the emperor dies, that proved that he was in fact not a god. Therefore, they have to tear down all of his statues. His wife gets killed as a heretic. And the thing is, everyone's really just reserved, like, accepting about this. Like, yeah, this is the way it is. Like we have the scribe, he gets jailed for being a heretic, and they ask him, who do you worship? And he says, I worship Pippin I think it's it's like Pippin the Fifth. And they're all like, he is dead. That is heresy. We must now kill you unless you renounce and say that you believe in Pippin the Sixth. And he's like, oh, well, yes, I do then. Oh, and the interrogators are like, oh, well, that's all right then. I gotta go and take some more of these. You know your way out, right? It's just so routine at this point, this entire process. And honestly, that opening reeks of Monty Python. It is the Spanish Inquisition level of absurdity. It's amazing. And here's what is really stunning about this story. Because, the Doctor and Frobisher, they land in the middle of this, and obviously this is insanity that's going on. And things just play out from there. But what's brilliant about this story, because I know very little about most of these Big Finish stories before I listen to them. And that's by intent. I really want to come in cold and be surprised by them. So what amazed me is that I got worried early on. I'm like, okay, this is funny. This is absurdist. This is pointed. I got worried, is this going to become an overly snarky, just punch down at religion and religious beliefs and faith? Because regardless of my own feelings about faith, I wasn't raised in a religious household, but so regardless of my own feelings about it, whenever I see people like pick at it for humor, it can usually come across really condescending, really mean-spirited. It's a big part of why I can't stand Ricky Gervais. Like, I really can't stand him. And as much as I love him, some of George Carlin's stuff towards the end of his life rubbed me the wrong way for that same reason. And again, it's not because it's attacking beliefs I actually have. It's just because there's nothing but meanness or a sense of superiority behind it. And I was really worried that I was going to get that here. Because I felt like the setup had the potential to go in that direction. But not only did it, first of all, open with the smart kind of, picking on religion, which things like, say, Monty Python's Life of Brian does so brilliantly, which is to, rather than attack the concept of faith, attack the practices of it. So it's not saying religion is bad, it's saying look at the craziness that we allow to go on in the name of that. So it's very carefully targeted. It's not, it's well balanced. So it opens well balanced in that way. But then ultimately, as the story unfolds, and I can't really say what it turns into, but it's not about religion. It uses the filter of religion to talk about rituals, the point of them, the use of them, the danger of them, the absurdity of them. And it does that through the filter of these slightly political, but mostly religious rituals that this society is going through. But it's not that's the trappings. That's not what it's really about. And when I say that it kind of becomes about something else, I also don't want to sell it wrong. It's not like a huge twist. It's not like it really throws you for a loop, but gradually as the story goes on, where it ends up by the end is absolutely not anywhere that I would have thought it would have gone based off the starting setup and the opening premise and the first quarter or so of this story. And it's a gradual shift. So it's not like hard gear shift and now we're doing this. It's like about 20 minutes into things having started to shift, I look back and go, oh, this isn't where we started at all. And it brings in. And again, like when I said I like this better than Spare Parts, I really need to underline the word me, because it hits so many things that I personally love and really enjoy seeing explored in fiction. Pretty much none of which I can get into until I get into spoilers. So what else do I want to talk about before I get to spoilers? Well, let's talk about the Doctor. Colin Baker, he's very good as the Doctor. And it's funny because his direct involvement in the plot is fairly peripheral for most of it. And there have been times that's been a problem for me. I hate it when it feels like the story would have resolved without the Doctor. Thankfully, that's not the case here. He is often background or sidelined during the proceedings of what's going on, but he is ultimately very important in terms of resolving everything at the end, yet at the same time doesn't feel like he just swept in and fixed everything for everybody, but he is sort of like nudging things to where they need to get. So that works in terms of his level of involvement, and it also helps that the supporting the cast of characters, this society is really compelling. And on a lot of different levels, and again, in a way that shifts because it starts out so funny in its absurdity, and then it gets a little bit dark as you realize the degree to which all of this goes and gets taken, and then it gets really unsettling at points, and you discover new layers of depth, new meaning, just as the story progresses. And through these characters besides the Doctor. Now, Frobisher, who I mentioned, I enjoyed him. I liked him. He wouldn't even make my top 5 characters from this episode, though. He wouldn't. I mean, the Doctor would still make the top 5, but like before I would bring up Frobisher, I'd bring up Eugene, the scribe, who's this incredibly endearing old man who's just, he's not a part of the story, but he's constantly trying to keep track of it and also embellishing it, to make it sound a little bit better, because every coronation there has to be a miracle, and usually it's literally a magic trick. It's literally like a card trick or whatever, but when he copies it down, it's a volcano or it's an earthquake or, things like that. So he's great. I love him a lot. There's Childrick, who's kind of he's a take on Richard III. Basically, he's the twisted half brother of the guy who's the rightful successor, and things that are done with him are really interesting. The mother of the new God Emperor, she is fascinating to me. Like that, every time she talked, I'm like, I could just pick at this forever and just so enjoy what I'm getting, what I'm uncovering. There's a high priest character that takes some really interesting turns. Like, this is just, it's an astonishing cast and all really well performed. And I part of me really worries that I'm overselling this, but again, I'm just going to emphasize this was amazing to me. I don't know if everyone's inclinations for what they like out of stories are going to line up with mine so that you will get the same experience I had with this. But for me, this was astounding. And now I'm going to start getting into spoilers so I can talk more specifics about why. So spoilers in 3, 2, 1. So ultimately it becomes a story about relationships between parents and children, the things that don't work, the damage when things go wrong, the degree to which children can't understand what's going on with their parents, yet continue to have faith and hope in them, and the way that we run away from the horrible things we've done, the way that rituals can be used as a way to distract us from the things that we don't want to have to deal with, the way that rituals can at the same time be very comforting and can give us something meaningful. The meta levels of this thing, as it goes on, and you realize that this is a story that is effectively being written, and it is a story. It's a deliberate narrative within the audio drama itself. And Eugene, being, the guy who's written everything down and has effectively created this world, even though he doesn't understand that that's his place in all this. And you realize all these characters who were, at one point the doctor says to the high priest, "You're a stereotype." And he's not even saying that as a put down, like, what's wrong with you, or is insulting him. He's being honest. He's telling him, like, you were written by a guy who doesn't have the creativity to give you depth. You are a stereotype. That is all you can ever be. And then to have the high priest, like, try so hard to defy his own nature and be like, I'm going to die. I can't escape it. I will have a noble death. And it doesn't work. And he breaks down, and he becomes the sniveling, backstabbing thing that is his nature, because that's what always happens, because he wasn't granted the depth of character by his creator to ever possibly be more than that. And yet you've got some characters where there's hints that there is a little bit more than that. The mother I mentioned, she is so cruel, and she revels in it, but she's so tired of everything. She is exhausted by it, and she knows she is going to be tortured and killed, and she is not only resigned to it, she welcomes it. She knew it was going to happen sooner or later, and she's ready. And it's that sort of, that weird balance of, I want to say villain. She's not really, but she's not a good person. She's an awful person. Yet at the same time, having this weary acceptance of their role in the world. It's part of what I love about Jareth in Labyrinth. I talked about that when I talked about that movie. And so you've got all that going on, and it managed to also be touching and moving and really, really sad. And I can see, because I know this predates a lot of it, I can see where later episodes of Doctor Who have borrowed elements from this story. I'm not going to say ripped off, because some of the things I'm going to mention took them and ran either in completely new directions or fleshed out one specific aspect of this audio into it so that it's its own thing. But things like this ultimately proves to be a prison that just keeps looping back around and around and around and around, where this guy has to keep reliving and suffering through his crime over and over and over again. But the loop of that is effectively the same thing the confession dial was in Heaven Sent. So there's that. You've got this child god murderous thing that keeps asking, "Are you my father?" Which I can't help but think, "Are you my mommy?" With the empty child. But it's more than just that superficial connection, because it also touches on the way that children see their parents. In the case of the empty child, that child's need to find its mother, and how that overrides almost everything else. And this force, because it's in the body of a child, is so destructive, because it doesn't have the moral compass yet to understand and appreciate what it is doing. But it needs to find its mother. Now, in this story, in The Holy Terror, we've got this really mixed up thing where the child entity thing seems to very much have an awareness of what it's doing. It seems to revel in others' pain, yet the lines are delivered in a way that still retains just a touch of that childlike innocence, where you really wonder, does it truly understand what it is doing? I mean, it's obviously having fun. It says it wants to kill. It takes enjoyment out of that. But you have to wonder, is any part of this just a complete failure to understand because it's too young to know what it is that is going on? But then towards the very end, there's a line, I forget the exact wording, but there's a line where it's talking to Eugene, who is ultimately revealed to be the father of this thing. It's representative of his own child that he killed, and that's why he's in this thing and has to keep reliving it. He's the one paying for the crime. And it says, "I worshipped you." And the moment that got me, that choked me up and got a tear, was when it catches up to Eugene, because it's been hunting him basically through the last segment of the story. And, you know, Eugene normally at this point would be killing it again, because that's what he always does. He kills it, then it goes away for a while, and then it comes in. He rebuilds this world, and then it comes back. And he hesitates here, and he hesitates long enough that the creature comes to him, and it doesn't kill him. It doesn't even say it wants to kill him. It says, "I'm sorry," and asks for forgiveness. The logic being, I must have done something so horrible that caused you to kill me. Because that is the thought process of a young child. Because to a young child, its parents are gods. They are supposed to fix everything. They are supposed to take care of everything. They are the end all be all when you're at a young age, and you have to trust them. You have to have faith in them. And if they do something, and you know, there must be a reason for it. And so to that young, 4 or 5-year-old sense of logic, my father killed me. It must be because I did something awful. Please forgive me. And it's Black Mirror levels of messed up. And of effective. So that really hit me very hard. So definitely with how farcical this thing starts out, the fact that it ultimately hit me as emotionally as it did by the time it was done was astounding. And along the way, touching on so many other things that I love, like the razor sharp humor, properly targeted, never punching down humor. Because again, even though it's using the framework of religion, really what it's talking about, it can be applied to any ritual. Any ritual, whether it is a religious ritual, a political ritual, just a ritual in your own home, something just you and your family, you do. Why? Because it's what you've always done. You don't think about it anymore. It's just poking at that behavior. And that feels, at least to me, really clearly articulated throughout the piece. There's wonderful levels of meta humor in this, because I love stories about stories and the power of stories and the importance of stories, which this also is, because that's what's going on with Eugene. He keeps creating this world basically so that he doesn't have to think about what he did, and it holds his attention until the rituals repeat so many times that they lose their meaning and it doesn't make sense anymore. And then the child comes back again and destroys it all. And there's almost nothing to criticize about this thing. It's actually really hard to criticize, because like some of the stuff that you could criticize, by the time the story's over, it becomes clear these were actually features of the narrative. So like some of the characters are really broadly sketched. They're arch. They are stereotypes, as the Doctor himself says. But then by the time you hit the end, you realize, oh, That's by design. That's not a fault. That's a feature. So it makes it really hard to criticize. I do have one criticism, and that is at the very end, in terms of what little we learn about why Eugene killed his child. We really don't get much. And I'm not saying like I needed grisly details, but what we get is a line from him. His child asks him why, and he says, because I was mad. And I'm not mad as in angry, mad as in crazy. And that's a cop-out to me. It feels it's too easy to just toss it off as that, as it feels like something that wasn't properly explored, and it feels like if it had been properly explored, it maybe could have been even more unsettling than it was. Because I feel like prior to that, it had been hinting at more than that. There were lines about, how I'm supposed to love my child. That's normal. Why can't I be normal? I will love you forever as long as you never come near me. And the thing is there are times that as a parent, you have thoughts or you have notions that make you feel wrong or awful, even if it's for a split second, or maybe you feared having that. I know for me, before my kid was born, I was really worried because, all through the pregnancy, I was excited. I was supportive of her mother and everything, but I wasn't feeling like this direct connection to this life yet. But after she was born, I did start to feel that, and that was in many ways a huge relief, because I had a dreadful fear that I was not going to connect with my own kid, because honestly, I'm weird around kids. Like I'm really uncomfortable around kids, and that hasn't changed having had my own. I love my kid. I like to think I'm pretty damn good with my kid, but that hasn't changed. So there was a fear of like, am I going to be as weird around my own kid as I am around other kids? And I felt like this story had the opportunity to hit even harder by drilling into those kinds of fears, which I think are real, or those sorts of fleeting thoughts that we have as parents. If I could just run away, like just for an hour, which you have that thought, and it's a normal one to have, but you feel awful afterwards, and this becomes like that times 10 or times a million, really. But it doesn't go there in the end. It just tosses it off as this implication that he did something crazy, and that, yeah, like I said, it feels like a bit of a cop-out, and that was a little disappointing. But that is literally the only complaint that I have. This story, it astounded me. This was really, really good. And the thing is, I don't usually take a lot of notes when either I watch something or listen to something. Occasionally I do, like I did when I watched War Games, because that's friggin' long, and that was multiple sessions for me to get through. But I kept scribbling down notes for this. Elements and aspects that I really liked, lines that I love. I never write down lines. Like, if a line really connects with me, maybe I'll remember it when it comes time to do the review, but I'm never like, I gotta write that down. I had multiple here, and so now I'm actually just gonna take another look at my notes and see what I forgot to talk about, so I can tell you that's awesome. Okay, so Childrick, I kind of glossed over him a little bit. The extensive villain for the opening chunk of it, the twisted sibling, the Richard III kind of guy. I love the fact that he doesn't know he's basically a parody of a mustache twirling villain. And just that moment, that turnaround moment when he's talking with his mother and he's like, I've resolved to be the villain, almost quoting Shakespeare exactly. And his mother just going, yes, but you never were evil enough. Like, again, I love this mother. God, what else was there? There's a great little moment where Frobisher and then the new emperor are in front of the console, and the emperor calls it an altar, and Frobisher says, no, it's a console. And the emperor, he says, well, you say that you stand there and it allows you communication and means of travel to other places and other realms. Well, yeah. Well, that, my friend, is an altar. And just finding ways around it, or just some of these lines, talking about rituals. Of course they don't make any sense. Otherwise they wouldn't have to be rituals. We just do them without a second thought. Like that. What an amazing line that is. Or the mother talking with her son, and she's talking about love, and she says, stay, perhaps you'll do the impossible and teach me after all. She was ready to be dead because she figured she was done. She had no useless and had no use in the world anymore. Like her part in the story was done. But she's had this notion that you love me. Can you teach me how? But not like in a pleading way, just in a maybe you can. Like I don't think she had any hope or faith that would be the case, but it's possible. She'll give it a shot. Like the depths of all this. And then, of course, the doctor, and this circles back around, it doesn't matter to whom the cruelty is directed, the cruelty itself is wrong. And that, not only is that a great line, that is a wonderful sentiment. And I think like something a lot of us could stand to really kind of have ingrained in our heads as hard as is possible, because I think there's a lot of times that a lot of us will justify terrible behavior because of who it's directed at. Like, yes, okay, so what I did wasn't great, but it's okay because this person was mean to me first. It's okay because I was in a really bad mood. It's okay because it was funny. It's okay because I fundamentally don't think this person matters as much as I do. Whatever the justification may be, but no matter how you paint it, cruelty is cruelty, and cruelty is wrong. It doesn't matter who you do it to, or it shouldn't. So, yeah, this was a really amazing listen, and I don't know which big finish I'm gonna do next. That's not true. I do know because my Patreon supporters already selected it for me, but I do not envy the next one I have to listen to, because having to follow on from this is these are big shoes to fill. So that's The Holy Terror. Big finish. Wow. Have you heard it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's all the stuff to do, such as like and subscribe. I mentioned my Patreon a few times. For only $1 a month, you too can contribute ideas, notions, throw out things that I might do, can vote in polls to help me decide which Big Finish story to do next, which classic Who story to do next, and other things along those nature. Help me guide this channel to be the best that it can be. So there's all that in Twitter and blah, 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 blah. Links for all that is down in the description. So until next time, this council is adjourned.